the flow of today. So welcome to this afternoon's discussion around quality and its impact on predictability, because it obviously does impact predictability. If we don't know that everything we're going to do is right first time, we can't plan effectively, or we're planning for waste within the process. So we've got a 30-minute session, and I'm just going to share my screen with the slides so I can actually get going. So my name is Mark Worrell. I run BBI Services, Building Business Improvement. We work obviously closely with the National Highways and the Supply Chain Sustainability School, run a lot of the lunch and learns for highways, have organised workshops and the Toyota Masterclass. And so I'm hosting today. The two people who are presenting with me, we have Andy Grove, who's the Head of Quality for Major Projects, Michael McCusker, Head of Quality in the Civil Engineering Division of Graham Construction. So we're going to be talking about quality and predictability. We're going to aim to talk or discuss things for 20 minutes. I have got on a separate screen Q&A, well, the questions running. So if I'm not looking at my screen, I'm looking at the other screen. We're going to try and answer some questions as we're going along, but we're also trying to leave 10 minutes towards the end for proper questions, because I think if anybody saw the productivity one this morning, we filled the whole sort of time. So with Andy going first in it, I'm going to hand straight over to Andy. Just want to introduce yourself, Andy, and then I'll move on to your slides when you're ready.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Andy Grove, as it says, Head of Quality for Major Projects, part of the SES quality function that was set up around 18 months ago now. Yeah, that's me. You can find me in Manchester most days. But yes, if we move on to the next slide. So I suppose just to start this session, just a little bit of sort of NH context, really. As I say, quality is relatively new as a sort of discussion topic in many ways in National Highways. We've done quite a lot over the last 18 months or so to establish it as a topic. We have a charter that's been signed off by Nick Harris, which sort of sets out a general direction of travel and ambition. We've kind of focused around 5 immediate priorities that have been identified and agreed with the exec, and we've been working with the new supplier quality group that has also been set up as part of this broader quality initiative. Broadly speaking, though, we're mindful of the impact of quality and the potential opportunities it offers around, whether it be around cost, and you'll be probably familiar with the sort of savings numbers that Geary talk about in terms of impact of cost of poor quality, but also in terms of sort of carbon and safety, and around the opportunities around predictability. I'm not going to go through this slide in great detail. You'll get a copy of it, and you're welcome to come back to me and ask questions about these 5 priorities. Sorry, next slide. So the question is, having sort of made that start and got things on the agenda, where do we go from here? And I suppose one of the sort of overarching impressions that we've gained is that sort of historic focus around sort of what quality is understood to be, and what it's meant in our organization. And I think to a great extent the focus has been on that sort of quality control element, making sure that we get that compliant, defect-free delivery. Some of you will be familiar with this plan, do, check, act cycle. So in that context, we plan quality ostensibly through our supplier quality plans. We execute, we check what's been done, and if there's everything is good, then fine, and if things are not right, then they are corrected. Probably where there's been less focus is around completing that cycle, and by that what I mean is how do we learn from the information that we've gained, whether that be from our current project or from previous projects. How do we use that information to start thinking about how we prevent poor quality rather than just control it, and how do we use that information to inform our understanding of risk, and our understanding of what we take into the next project. It's basically a sort of moving from a situation where it's not just about control to achieve compliance, but it is actually, how do we actually get better at prevention and improvement and lessen the impact of poor quality. So as much as anything, this session today is about understanding some of those approaches, maybe some of those tools that you'll be able to use, facilities that you'll be able to use in this, in order to sort of get this sort of more visible understanding of what impact quality is actually having and how we reduce some of the repetitive errors that probably we still see quite a lot of at the moment. If we move on to the next slide, I think I'll be handing over to Michael on this one, I think.
Yes, thanks, Andrew. Yeah, so along the theme that Andrew sort of started into, I'm Michael McCusker. I'm the head of quality for Graham Construction Civils side. And basically what I sort of wanted to introduce you to is one of the tools that's available out there to try and improve this lessons learned. The Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle has been around for a long time, and trying to get that loop closed is the problem, as Andy says. A person learns from mistakes, but corporations and businesses have a tendency to struggle with change. And within Graham, we have a number of ways that we work on that, and we try to improve the business. But one of the things that we're currently piloting with the Get It Right initiative is their error reduction framework. And that's it works on quality maturity, and trying to improve the whole business and work on the behaviors. As you can see there at the top of that top little graph there, that should be familiar to any of you that have worked with lean practices in the past. It's quite a DMAIC type process of trying to understand the problem, figure out what's going on, fix it, change it, and get that cycle to keep going. But where the ERF is hoping to improve on that practice is actually then the behaviors. Looking at the people in the room, the business, look at how they're behaving on a day-to-day basis, and why decisions are being made in certain areas. Where we're focusing on this in practice is concrete. As you can imagine, we're a civil engineering firm, so we have an awful lot to do with concrete. And the fact that there's effectively a whole industry there in repairing concrete after it goes in highlights the fact that as an industry, we are quite happy to accept these problems. We want to improve on that. We're involving our supply chain, we're involving clients, and that's all being run through this ERF. The ERF is through the Get It Right initiative. It is available there for everybody to take a look at and try and use. And we're putting it out there to try and promote this way of improving and embedding improvement on a day-to-day basis, bringing it back to the whole business. The COMBI is what we call the behavioural side of it. We'll just then move on to yourself, Mark, and move on to the lean side of it.
Yeah. Just going back, and Andrew, you were saying, just to your previous slide, that Plan, Do, Check, Act sort of cycle is often broken. You were talking about lessons learned, but do you think it's broken on a more daily basis?
I think it's a combination of both. I mean, what we have to reflect on in our sector is where does this fit in with the sort of list of daily priorities? And obviously, in the day-to-day management of projects, there are immediate priorities in terms of sort of delivering. And sometimes that means this gets parked, I think, because it's something for the future rather than something for today. There's a whole range of issues that we need to work on, which we can improve on. Not all of them starting from a bad place, but in terms of that sort of early identification of issues, timely identification of issues, across projects, across supplier use of data and knowledge around some of the issues that we're seeing. So we get away from this kind of thing where their sort of issues stay within their silo of an individual scheme or an individual supplier. So there's a lot we can go at with on this, and some of it does relate to the sort of day-to-day stuff, and some of it relates to them at that more sort of strategic view about how we improve for the future.
Cool. Yeah. And we'll come back to some more of these questions as we wrap up. So just to look at quality, from an improvement point of view, and we wanted to just reflect again on lots of people have looking outside the sector, and we took a lot of people this year. We have some more people to Toyota to look at their production system, engine production system, and really challenge the thinking around, it might be a different sector and it might have a lot of differences, but what are the key learning points that we can draw out of that? So we just wanted to reflect on that in this next sort of session, and then we'll do some Q&A. So we've been running this construction to production masterclass, which really, as it sits at the top of the fact that with the supply chain school and National Highways, we run a bunch of lunch and learns, and we've done videos, we've done foundation tools and practitioner programs, but been running leadership workshops. And this masterclass sits there as one of the opportunities to inspire and drive a different way of thinking. So we go away and we go to Toyota and have a look at their production system and what makes it tick in real detail. Core in the middle of that is how they treat and engage their workforce, going back in a way to the PDCA. So it's a very practical day, and we'll come on to what that looks like. But we wanted just to put in here, these were, when we break out into groups, some of the key messages and key thoughts from everybody who'd attended. First of all, visualization is everywhere in everything, whether it's strategic plan deployment or quality defects, a cabbage patch, if you like. All defects are really simply visually illustrated for everyone to see, right, we have a problem, and a problem is an opportunity. Everything is standardized, not in a way of constraining innovation, but as a way of generating innovation. Because if we have a standard process that we're all agreeing is the best current way, then we have something to build upon, and we can get consistency that everybody does it that way. Culture and behavior is key, and everyone is equal and can drive improvement. But those behaviors from the leadership is they're visible such a lot of the time in the workplaces, actually at the sites, looking at what's going on. We talked a lot this morning actually around data collection. You just mentioned there, Andy, that capturing this data in the sector might actually be quite new, but we need to understand where are those defects and what defects are they, so we can actually get into the nitty-gritty and hence the root causes. And robust quality processes, I don't mean they're the quality processes producing things, but it's the checking, the quality processes that of anything that anybody's doing produces a right first time output with the least amount of waste and removes areas of inefficiency, so we're getting more out and it's right first time. So this is what, when we go to Toyota and we look at the engine plant, it looks like. We can't put up pictures around what it looks like on track. We actually do go out there, but as you see at the bottom left, we actually get a good thorough understanding from the Toyota guys, go and have a good look around in detail, and then in the afternoon, we're really looking at what have we learned, what could we do, and how could we apply it collectively back in our companies, and tailoring it very much to suit your company. Something that came out this morning's session around productivity, when we were talking about this, was that everybody's gone away and done something slightly different. There's been no copying and paste. What's right for Balfour's or John McCann's, they've turned it into like the McCann way, their way that suits their business. So it's not copy and paste. But one of the things that was very key this morning was the interrelationships between productivity, predictability, and quality. If we get all of those things working together and have a simple focus on when are we adding value, not adding value, and where is the waste in the business. But sometimes we see quite disjointed approaches. And one of the comments was to actually visualize, as I said, those quality defects and that waste in the business. And why I talk about waste quite a bit, really, is because when it gets down to it, quality fits into the wastes that we see. So you see it there. It's not necessarily that it's the bottom of the list. It's actually the worst or a terrible waste. But by that point, when we've done something wrong, we've actually done all the other wastes. We've probably done some value adding. So it's actually very expensive when we get round to fixing it and then doing it again. So what are we trying to do for this? And I wasn't going to go through, we talked earlier with Lorraine, we're not going to put up lots of pathways and things. It's just a general principle of trying to get into learn by doing and changing mindsets in the sector. So by that, we want to make sure everyone's got the right tools and techniques. We've also got the right skills and competencies to create a challenging environment and challenge those cultural norms. There's in the sector, we feel it's changing, but there's too much, at this stage, acceptance on things. I'm going to have to do some things again. So it's really make sure we've got those skills to do problem solving, communication, collaboration. We've got those tools, digital tools if they need be, or just mechanisms. And we're creating that environment to challenge the norm, which will give us that behavior that we actually want. So I put this slide in because I think we just mentioned it earlier. We worked with some Australian guys who've done the research around quality and safety, because we can talk about productivity and predictability and the cost of quality, but these guys actually pulled together the research around the safety impact of quality. And by the fact they analysed thousands of non-conformance reports and loads of data and identified that 39% of injuries actually occur during rework, and that your likelihood of being injured while doing rework is much higher. Logically, really, it's maybe hasn't got a set method statement. So what we're finding under the quality opportunity is cost, safety, and it impacts predictability. So we've actually put more pressure on our workforce and more pressure on the business, if you like, as well. So coming back to Andy's point, we wanted to ask the question, Andy, this was your sort of slide that I moved out of your section into this one. Do you want to just sort of recap on the ask?
Yeah, sure. And probably these bullets in some way are the wrong way up. There's obviously, in terms of trying to promote and reward the behaviors that encourage prevention and improvement. There's things that we can do at an organizational level, and the bullets on the right hand side are around a sort of revised CPF criteria, and all of that is good. But I think probably all of us have that experience where we're sort of promoting this message, where we're talking to people that say, what's in it for me? What do I get out of this? Because really, we need to be able to give a good answer to that question in order to really drive the behavior from the perspective of all the individuals who are working on a scheme. So I suppose in terms of the discussion, it's how do we do that? How do we utilize that knowledge from previous projects? How do we we know within our projects at the moment we have some issues with precast concrete, we know we have some issues with drainage. When we start a new project, how do we bring that understanding into our planning of the new project? How do we sort of embed that thinking that says, we don't have to wait for something to go wrong. We know some of the things that have gone wrong in the past. We know some of the things that are likely to go wrong as a result. How do we use that knowledge to prevent things going wrong rather than just correct them when they do?
And do you think that's sometimes because there's a reliance on lessons learned at the end of projects, as opposed to what are we learning as we go through projects?
My opinion around this is that sometimes, lessons learned, it kind of suffers a bit, as probably quality plans do as well, from that idea that it's, it's a PCF product, it's an exam that's got to be passed in order to sort of proceed to a subsequent stage. I mean, my question, I get to review all the quality plans, and the question that, you know, we're asking increasingly now is, you know, what's the lessons learned at the start of the project? You know, what do you bring into this project, and how can we see that that informs the planning that you're proposing to carry out around quality on this project? So it's not about what happens at the end. It still needs to happen at the end, because, you know, obviously there's other schemes to follow, but it's something that needs to happen at the beginning. And as I say, it's moving away from correction, and even moving away, if you like, from that sort of corrective action. It's looking at the whole sort of preventive. How do we eliminate these issues so that we're not having to cope with the unplanned? Because when we're dealing with the unplanned, that's where the predictability obviously goes out the window.
So something John McCann brought up this morning, which we saw when we did the masterclasses, was around visual standard operating procedures, about getting into the nitty-gritty of processes. Instead of a hefty method statement, was down to some much simpler A4, A3 visual standard operating procedures.
Mm-hmm.
And which, as you said, help people really understand what they're supposed to do to get a quality outcome and why they're supposed to do it. And he was talking about how they're introducing that in McCann's to help define the process, understand the best way of doing it, and then make sure everybody adheres to it. And I don't think that's, as a real base sort of approach, terribly widely adopted. John's one of the first people I've heard talking about the standard operating procedures and moving away from hefty sort of method statements.
Mm-hmm.
So what have we got there? How do we embed learning from previous projects? My feeling on that as well is we need to get into your PDCA more regularly. So if something happens, we actually can quickly learn from it and disseminate that into the organization and other people. So is that happening through your quality group?
Probably the biggest step forward that we will get with this, as I say, and I touched on it before, is that a lot of the sort of data and knowledge around quality stays within a scheme, or stays within an organization. One of the areas that one of my colleagues has been working on with the supplier quality group is, how do we get to that point that I think most organizations get to at some point, where suddenly they recognize that they're seeing the same issue in lots of different places, and you've got that eureka moment where you're saying, well, hang on, this isn't just happening here, this is happening across the whole portfolio. And then suddenly an issue that doesn't seem that big in and of itself, suddenly you realize is actually quite high impacting. So there's probably an element here where we're looking for an upgrade in that reporting, so we can start to see where these common issues are. The first slide I showed, there was something on there about significant quality incidents, and the idea of significant quality incidents were, you know, those were the fires that had to be put out. And those are reported up to our exec group, because they are what they say. They might be one-off, but they're significant, and they go upstairs because they need to be handled upstairs. But there's a lot of lower level stuff that will be happening across the whole business, which probably isn't recognised, and we need to get to the point of being able to recognise it. So even if you've not experienced it, you can be aware of the risk.
Yes, and I think that data helps quantify the benefits as well. And is that something, Michael, you said you focused in on concrete at Graham's? Was that born out of any data, if you like, and have you been able to sort of get that data to quantify? Don't have to disclose anything, but if you've managed to get that data.
No, we do have quite a bit of data, and yes, I've shared it quite frequently around the place, because it is one of those things. My history, my background, I had 20 years in materials laboratories, so yeah, it was beneficial for me, for contractors to make mistakes in concrete, because that allowed me to to get out there and do more tests and do more work on it. So it is frustrating that we're still having those problems. I think one of the useful things that we roll out is build it wrong workshops. It's getting the experts in the room before we move into a phase of works, getting the supply chain and the subby in, getting the design team and client, and actually asking the question, right, we've all done this before, we've got the experience, where's it going to go wrong? We're going to build this bridge, we're about to do this. You all around this room have seen something go wrong in the past. Where is this going to fail? And how can we avoid that? And that moves into the risk reduction.
Yeah. And those are very, established tools and techniques. Failure mode and effects analysis is, it's a bit of a negative thing, but where can this go wrong? What's the effect of that and the potential impact? And gives us the priorities as to, what could go wrong and then what actions do we need to take? So it's good to see those sort of mechanisms coming into the sector. And as you said, did you say build it wrong workshop or build it
wrong? Yes, build it wrong.
Okay.
It does go around. People look at you with a bit of an eye of, really, this has come from quality.
Yeah.
But yes, it's good to sort of figure out where we're going to make the mistake before we make it.
Yeah. and I think because some people will always say everything we build is brand new, it's a new prototype. But there is some consistency, isn't there, of established processes that we've got, particularly when we now hone down into highways or other sectors. Okay, so look, we're just coming up to the end of the 30 minutes because I know Lorraine likes us to particularly wrap up bang on time or a little bit early to give people a chance to get a drink. Is there any? I've just had a question come in about PDCA. Feels like one layer, the work is done, then we check it's correct, and if it isn't, we act. Okay, I think that's one way of looking at it. I think what we want to be, we haven't maybe talked around actually getting the processes robust and correct in the first place, and this being a final approach. It's a good point though. Product at the end of a cycle as opposed to something that you build during the process. So that's something we've got to look at. Yeah, and I completely agree. The whole journey of product development, sort of what Michael was saying, and the whole value chain. Yeah, look at the whole process. Cool. So, right, closing points there then. We talked about the frameworks. Andrew, you talked about your groups and the priorities. And I think that continual capture of the data so you can actually quantify where those risks are. And Michael, it'd be good to see your feedback at some point on what you're seeing in Graham as the impact of some of those activities. We've talked about what we can learn from other sectors and translate that into our sort of sector and learn from it, and not necessarily copy and paste, but what we can bring to the fore. And we've talked around improvement cycles, standard operating procedures, visualization. Behaviors, though, comes up with, there's one comment earlier about skills boot camps on behavioral safety, and maybe we need to turn that into something else for quality. So look, Andrew, Michael, thanks for your time. Lorraine, Poppy, thanks for arranging everything. And I think if there's no more questions, we will stop there.
Thank you very much, folks.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.